This is Derrick Broze of the Conscious Resistance, and today I'm going to bring to you guys my friend, my guest, Adam Kokesh, who is recently freer, a little bit freer than he was before, but still in the free-ish world. So how are you doing today, Adam?
Outstanding. Thanks for having me on, Derrick.
Absolutely, man. It's been a while since we've talked a little bit and chatted on the changes that you've been going through in your platform and just your activism, and then now yesterday going to court. So before we get into the good stuff, the activism, your book, and all that exciting stuff, let's get the other stuff, the other gossip out of the way. So what's the case that you dealt with yesterday, and what was the outcome?
This was the last dangling issue from the civil disobedience from Independence Day last year with the shotgun civil disobedience video at Freedom Plaza. And I had the charges in D.C. We dealt with that final issue in January of this year, and I was sentenced to time served, which in that case was 3.5 months plus probation. And I had two other charges that were stemming directly from the raid about possession of drugs and drugs with guns here in Virginia. And, I had done 2.5 weeks in jail in Virginia, so in a sense I got time credit for that. But I think that was just a consideration of the judge. She was much more sympathetic to everything else that I had gone through as a result of this. And in the hearing yesterday, I really don't know how else to describe her attitude other than I think she was a fan, like I was shocked with the way she was talking about it, the way she was like, well, I can't help you out this way because legally blah, 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 we're already at this point, I'm required to. And, the last hearing that we had was the plea hearing when I entered my Alford pleas, and it was very contested. And she asked, why should I accept an Alford plea instead of a normal plea? And we made the case, and my lawyer did a great job, Graziella Bianchi, and she did a great job at this hearing as well, thinking on her feet. But obviously the setting was a little bit easier had we known what we were going into. Mm-hmm. And the prosecutor in this case is, from what I understand, one of these real drug warrior types who enjoys putting people away for victimless crimes. And the last word that we got right before this started was that he was going to be asking for a year jail time. And I was going in like, really stressed out, really just like, all right, well, we gotta be cool with this. But the pre-sentencing report recommended, the guidelines of 1 day to 3 months, and actually recommended downward departure from that, which is probation or something less than that. And the outcome was as good as it could have possibly been under the circumstances. I was sentenced to 3 months on each count concurrently and suspended. So, with no probation. So there's sort of an implied probation from that, as in, if I were to do something, the judge could unsuspend the charges, and I still have to meet with my lawyer to find out exactly what the terms and timing is for that. But basically, it's behind me now, and I have my another 16 months of probation left from the case in D.C., I believe, and it's supervised in California. It's already been transferred, so I'm really relieved because I wasn't so afraid of doing jail time, and we can talk about this a little bit, although I can't get too much into what I'm working on with my activism right now. But I was more afraid of getting some kind of complex probation requirement than doing jail time. I mean, going to jail for me, if it's not for too much time, it's kind of a fun little adventure. It's nice when you're going as an activist. And I weigh 200 pounds, so like I'm not really afraid of anybody in jail. Being a combat veteran and all that bullshit. There's but more importantly, they know that I'm someone that the public's keeping an eye on, both the guards and the other inmates. So, I wouldn't have minded going to jail for a little while to avoid, some other probation requirement or like Absolutely. A drug treatment program or, having some other requirement like that. So it was that wasn't the problem. That wasn't the fear. It really was just the potential for the extra hassle that came out of this. But like I said, the judge was extremely sympathetic to the point where she seemed like a fan, and that was just an incredible shock, but also a great relief.
Awesome, yeah. So you mentioned you still have the other probation that you're doing in California. So other than that, all the legal issues are over with.
Yeah, this was the only uncertainty. I'm not worried. It's it's a small limitation in my activism now to not be able to engage in real, outward risk arrest type civil disobedience. I mean, I can still, I got to be careful about like what I say on the record. I'll just say there's a lot of civil disobedience that everybody engages in on a daily basis because it's impossible to follow all of the rules. And but in terms of like actual arrest risk type of civil disobedience, I'm not going to be engaging in that for the time being. And, I don't really plan to. And if you want to talk about all the ways that I've changed since the book has come out, freedom. And, all the ways that my perspective has changed as a result of this experience, I'd be happy to get into that.
Sure, and I do want to say that it's important for people to recognize that civil disobedience, getting arrested, and all those different things are just one strategy amongst many. And you've always done a variety of things along with the show, the Man on the Street interviews, and of course activism in the form of getting arrested. But there's all sorts of ways to fight. So since then, since you dealt with the other case and got out of jail and came back, moved to California, you've been doing the show for a while, and recently you've changed it though. So you want to tell everybody a little bit about like how that's changed?
Yeah, well, we killed Adam versus the Man as a brand, and the main thing was that it's oppositional, not that it's confrontational. Confrontational, at least in my view now, is fine. In fact, it's very important that we're confrontational about the issues, that we confront people's cognitive dissonance that prevents them from embracing freedom, that we confront evil in the world, and that's what the state is. The state is institutionalized evil. Yes, there's lots of legitimate functions it serves, there are lots of good things it does, but as an institution that is premised on using violence against peaceful people, it is institutionalized evil. Government to control by force. It doesn't sound very good, does it? When you actually take the time to define it. So Adam versus the Man was also sort of that old mentality that I think a lot of libertarians have when they first wake up. And part of it is that when people wake up, they say, they get afraid, and they're afraid of the right things in a sense. They get angry, and very understandably so, and then they get sad about it, and it's like a very negative thing. It makes their outlook on the world negative, and then they go out and engage in activists and say, join me in my anger and my fear and my depression, and everybody goes, fuck you, I'm going back to sleep to watch Dancing with the Stars, and going back to my wage slave job and eating McDonald's. Why would I be a part of that movement? And obviously that's not everybody, because I think most people who stick with activism evolve past that. And that's a very important part of the book, freedom, in the way that it brings that to people, because it pulls people like straight past that phase of anger and fear and depression into being happy, being emotionally free, being empowered by the message of freedom. That's a very important distinction that sets it apart from, I think, any other libertarian writing that's out there. So being able to bring that to activism means thinking about what's most important. And we changed the name of the podcast to the Freedom Show, and I do my YouTube channel still from that, and all we have to do is still youtube.com/Adam Kokesh. Thanks to everybody who shared all our videos. We just hit over 30 million views. Nice. So thanks for that. And all we had to do was change the logo on the bottom corner of the screen, and we can rebrand there. But this is really something for me, taking the show from a daily news digest where it's like really rapid fire and it's like you're frantic every day putting it together. Now it's just a weekly show, and I'm able to have the time to put more thought into my production and what I do into YouTube videos. There's a couple of recent ones that I'm really proud of, about Robin Williams and about the Ice Bucket Challenge and the new Palestinian version, the Rubble Bucket Challenge. And I wouldn't have been able to do those if I was still doing 2 hours live 5 days a week. Yeah. And so I get to focus more on the book as well and the core message. But as to what's really important, and this I think is an important lesson for everybody in the movement to really consider, because we're a very small, tiny movement. And, if you really define libertarianism properly, I mean, people who understand what it means as the non-aggression principle and self-ownership, we're less than 1% of American society. And it is something cool to celebrate about America, that there are more libertarians probably per capita here than any other country in the world, except maybe Costa Rica, but a much smaller country, of course. And if it's 1%, that's still only 3.3 million. And then when you put it in those terms, you're like, nah, it's got to be less than that, unfortunately. So it's really not a good idea for us if you want to take this on as a movement. Like, how do we achieve a free society? How do we build a movement? It's not a good idea to engage in civil disobedience. That's really just to raise awareness about an issue or to get people to start thinking. And I'm always shocked at how many people have said that Jefferson Dance Party videos woke them up. Like, that's really cool. That got them on the process at least. But as you know, Derrick, and I mean, for me, it took me. I'm dense. I'm slow. It took me 10 years to go from, well, I'm a libertarian because I'm not going to be a Republican or a Democrat, to understanding it philosophically. And it was from reading The Ethics of Liberty by Murray Rothbard, which is part of the inspiration for this book, is taking that message and boiling it down to, it's just 100 pages. It's only 3 hours long. So what is it that we do to actually grow the movement? You have to win converts. You can't just change people's mind on an issue. You can't get them to support one candidate and vote a certain way. It's not enough to have arguments and to win arguments or to build an audience even. That really doesn't do it. And I'm very, of all the things in my activism, I'm very proud of the fact that I've been thinking in this direction for a while, and that Adam versus the Man has won a lot of converts as a media operation versus a radio show, then a TV show, and then an online show with a podcast and YouTube channel. I get emails all the time still from people saying, I finally get it. Thanks. That's what woke me up. That's what got me to embrace the message of freedom. But that's a slow process, and you're only getting people that are really ready to think. So the cool thing about this tool, and of the people that are listening, Derrick, I understand your audience is pretty hardcore. They're not the people that are the target audience for this book. I don't need them to read it. I need them to behold it. I need them to take it in and look at it and go, yeah, this is an outreach tool, and there's no better way to share the message with people. Like, there's no singular better tool. There's nothing you'd rather hand someone. And if you don't think that this is the ultimate tool, then, write your own or come up with your own thing, your own conversion method. But as to what I'm going to be doing now, aside from with my media operation, centering it around the book to promote this message, I'm going to be, I've got a big announcement coming up on the 15th, so I'm really excited about that. I don't want to spill the beans just yet, but we're going to be doing a lot of work to get as many free copies of this book in as many hands as possible. So I hope people will stay tuned and subscribe at thefreedomline.com and to the YouTube channel, youtube.com/Adam Kokesh. Find me on Twitter, all that good stuff, and get ready for a big announcement we got coming up.
Awesome. Sounds great, man. So let's talk a little bit about the book. What has the response been? You put it out officially on July 4th, right?
Yeah.
How's the response been, and have you had any comments as far as specific chapters or information that is really sticking with people?
Yeah, absolutely, and thanks for putting it that way. I almost wish there weren't any chapters that stood out in a sense that it was all like, no, it's just pure, just here's the message, and you can't do that obviously, but for 100 pages as being as dense as it is, there are a couple sections that do stand out that are of particular impact. Right now we've got over 20,000 views on the audiobook as a YouTube video, and those are, when you get when you get a view on YouTube, it's because somebody actually watched most of the video, and I'm really excited by that, the idea that there are over 20,000 people that have listened to it that way. I haven't checked the numbers in a couple of weeks, but the last time I did, we had a little over 20,000 downloads of the audiobook as well, and then another 20,000 or so downloads of the PDF or other of the the written forms of the book as well. And that's not even counting the numbers. I'm looking at my phone. We have an Android app that's a really badass thing that our publishers put together for us. I don't even know how many downloads that has. Of course, it's on the Kindle store or available as a Kindle on Amazon for 99 cents. Of course, then in the description says, but you can download it for free here. So that's we're not trying to sell this. We're not trying to make any money at all from the book itself, which is a really cool position to be in. And I'm really glad that people are getting behind that and supporting it. And they're supporting it by buying copies of the book. We're now selling singles that we're basically doing pretty close to at cost. $4 to ship a single book. And we're selling 100 packs for $139 that come with a t-shirt and a tote bag. Mm. So all the money that we make from that, at least that I make from that, is getting reinvested into buying more copies of the book to be able to use them as outreach tools for me to be able to have as many meaningful 2 to 10 minute conversations with strangers and give it out for free. But the people that have taken it in have been really supportive and really enthusiastic. Except for people that disagree with the message, I haven't had a single negative comment or negative review of this book at all. I've been blown away. But I started writing this when I was in jail, and the idea came to me, and I was like, we can do a survey of the literature of our entire movement, being relatively young and small. It's kind of cool. You can look back and see pretty much everything that's been written. And there have been a number of attempts at writing a book like this, but the key features that it has that everything else was missing or didn't have together, that it's not Amerocentric. It's global in its scope. It doesn't attack the American government. It talks about the modern phenomenon of government. It's not judgmental. It doesn't tell people they're wrong. It doesn't even really judge government. It just says this is how it is. This is how it could be better. It incorporates technology and its effect on society and government in particular, how people relate to government and looking forward with technology. It's in short, easy to understand sections. It breaks it down in very common language. It's irrefutable language. There's no exaggerations, no conjecture, no opinions, nothing like that. So it's really pure in that sense. And when I came up with the idea for the book when I was in jail, I was like, whoa, wait a second. Nobody's read this book yet? You mean like this dumbass? The guy sitting in solitary confinement right now? The guy that had to go to Iraq, to figure out that the war was a bad idea? This guy gets to write this book? You're kidding me. So when I got out, I had the rough draft complete. I shared it with about 300 people. I really refer to it as Out's book. And I asked people to poke as many holes in it as they possibly could. And, there's a couple of people in particular I want to thank, but, about 100 people read it before the deadline and gave thoughtful commentary, and a few dozen read it very closely and gave very meaningful feedback. And then it was about a dozen that, really read it line by line and gave feedback like that, really trying to poke holes in it. And I want to thank in particular Bob Murphy, who is the funniest economist ever, who came up with every single logical objection he could, and I changed about a dozen things in the book because of his influence. And then finally, my friend Tori Higgs, who really read it and did it edit with a fine-tooth comb to make sure every word was exactly what I wanted to say, exactly what the message needed to be, unobjectionable. And I think people right now are like, a lot of people have ordered 100 packs, and predictably, the shipment has been delayed in customs. And we're really looking forward to getting out all the gear to everybody who's ordered gear to help with our pre-sales, because that's what we had to do when we released it on Independence Day. It was released in every digital format that we had available at the time, including the audiobook, and then it was we started taking pre-orders for book sales. And I'm sorry there's been a bit of a delay. We're in September now. We were hoping to get these out at the end of August, and they're going to be a week or two behind. But I'm really grateful, especially for everybody that bought 100 packs, because they're buying these books to give them to their friends. It's that kind of book, and I think people in this movement will really appreciate when they get a chance to take it in. But man, I've been blown away. And if you count sales, we've already sold over 2,000 copies online before the book's even been released in paperback, and
awesome.
60,000 views or reads or downloads online. It's incredible. It's on an incredible trajectory. So I think we have people working on translations, a lot of volunteers working on translations as well. I've set the modest goal because there's getting everyone on Earth to read it would be a little ridiculous. But if we just get 1 in 10 people on the planet, 725 million, I think we can do that. And I think that's going to be enough to take us to the tipping point and the paradigm shift to help us evolve past government.
Well, I hope so, man. I hope that definitely does the job, because that would speed this process up for the rest of us. And I listened to the audiobook. I really enjoyed it, man. So did you have anybody point out specific chapters, though, or areas that they felt the strongest?
Yeah, thank you chapter that's really near and dear to me as a veteran, as you might guess. And chapter 3 is all about war, but there's one section in there called soldiering, and this is really important for people to get what it means to be a soldier, to be someone who's a paid killer for politicians, to be a cog in the machine, to be a trigger puller for that institutionalized system of evil. And that really, that one's had some impact, and people have been sharing that section separately with friends of theirs that are in the military, or with people who are, most importantly, people who are considering joining the military are getting a little extra perspective from this. There's two others that I want to point out. Chapter 9 is personal freedom, and the first section in that chapter is emotional freedom, then health freedom, then work freedom, then happiness causes freedom. And health freedom, you can kind of predict what it's going to be, although I'm looking forward to writing an entire book called Health Freedom. By the way, I'm writing an entire series of about 20 books when I get done with what's coming up with this big announcement on the 15th, to be called the Encyclopedia of Freedom, all in this very simple format, 100 pages, easy to read, irrefutable language. Enjoying freedom, achieving freedom. Health freedom is going to be one of them. The chapter economics is going to be pulled out and become its own book. And I'm really looking forward to being able to go into that next phase of my activism, being an author. And the two chapters at the beginning and end of chapter 9, emotional freedom and happiness causes freedom, I really think they were a little bit going out on a limb. If you think about being, you want to write the most widely acceptable libertarian manifesto to bring those things into it. But I don't think you can talk about freedom in a social sense without looking at, first of all, the mechanisms by which that control is exercised. And you cannot deny that one of them is emotional manipulation.
Absolutely.
And if it's and you know all about this. I mean, you're very tuned into all of this, and it's something that you talk about a lot. And you've had some influence on me, and especially recognizing the importance of. But if government wants you to be afraid and angry and depressed, or they want you to feel safe when they say this, or they want you to feel scared when they say this, then you're being prone to emotional manipulation. And if you just recognize that and recognize the process and what's happening, you can escape that. You can make yourself immune to it. And that's what Chapter 9, Section 1, Emotional Freedom, is all about. And I've had a couple people who read the book who were angry libertarians who were like, oh man, that cured my anger now. I'm like, I'm past that. It pulls you past that phase of your activism. And I think that's really cool. Derrick, of course, you read it. You didn't need that. You were already past that.
Well, you put it much better than I ever could, man. I think you really did a great job of putting all these points together. And also the part on emotional freedom, I think, is probably one of the most important. I mean, they're each equally important, but that really caps it off, and that's where the idea of the conscious resistance came from, is like taking things deeper beyond just the physical sense of liberty and freedom, and realizing. I mean, and again, I want to say again, as I've told you before, that when you got locked up and just coming out and seeing the way that just you chose to go within and work on that, I think that's probably one of the most powerful changes that anybody can go through. And I did the same thing while being locked up, so I really resonate with that and think that is probably going to be what will help your particular message grow much more than it ever could. Because as you said, there's levels of activism, from the angry, confronting type stuff towards, I've been finding myself focusing on journalism and writing as well, and trying to use the ideas and craft them in a way that's more palatable and to get to reach people, and also living this message. That's really where it's at. So I think that those are the steps that are going to lead towards this book being very powerful.
Yes, thank you. And what you said, I really appreciate. But it's not like I'm some brilliant writer. I just came up with this formula for the book. I took, and it's very specific in the book that I don't take credit for any of the ideas in that. Of course, being, having a section called intellectual property and explaining it as a government racket kind of makes it impossible for me to be like, yeah, I came up with that. Yeah, that was my idea. But no, I really, especially on the, in the subject in this book, I'm standing on the shoulders of so many intellectual giants, and in a way, you're one of them, Derrick. The final thing, though, is happiness causes freedom. And that's, I shouldn't say the final thing, but that's the last part of chapter 9, happiness causes freedom. And that was the first part that I wrote when I was in jail. And it was sort of like self-therapy. And, when I was in combat, when I was in Fallujah, there's something about the experience of being a Marine that kind of helps with this, because they call it the whistle past the graveyard sense of humor. But I was the guy in Iraq who, like, every day we woke up in the dirt, I get up and start singing songs and telling jokes and making everybody on my team feel better and give them a laugh. And understanding the connection of that and happiness and how that causes freedom and how the idea of life, liberty, pursuit of happiness, it's really backwards. And it's a dangerous trap that a lot of libertarians fall into. It's like, oh, well, I can't be happy because I'm not free. No, bullshit. If you're not happy, it's because you're not free in your mind. And because you haven't taken charge of yourself, you've allowed yourself to be a slave to circumstance. And just getting people to see that, it's the book's really dense. I gotta say, this is. I wish it wasn't so much. A lot of people listen to it. I know you don't have to do this, but a lot of people have listened to it and then said, okay, now I gotta read this. I gotta go back and I gotta read this section. And that's been really cool to see because I predicted that would happen. Chapter 10, though, all of chapter 10 is really fun. The future of freedom, and I think it's part of a big sort of underspoken part of the libertarian movement. A lot of libertarians end up going backwards in the way they talk and be like, oh, let's take back America, or let's go back to the Constitution, or go back to the ideals of the founders. It's like, no forward-thinking person is going to be attracted to that. Like that's instantly going to be like, well, wait a second, no, we're living in the future now. Like we want to move forward. And understanding how technology is empowering us and moving us to a more free society is very important in that process, but especially the subchapter on localization. And this is, Derrick, I mean, you can speak to this as well. This is the biggest thing that's been missing for our movement, what we communicate to people that aren't yet part of our movement, because they hear like these grand ideals and they hear this utopian vision, and when a Democrat says, well, it's going to be like this, but just more like this. They go, oh, okay, you're going to spend more money on that and less money on that. Okay, that's what makes sense. And a Republican says, well, our vision is this, it's going to be this different. And, blah, blah, blah. And then a libertarian comes along and says, well, our vision's really different from any of those. They go, well, how are you going to do that? And the libertarian answer is never, well, we're going to wait for the collective. Wiped out. Like, that's not an acceptable answer for anybody with any kind of compassion. And what I've figured out, and again, not really an original idea, but somewhat original in this context, is the concept of localization. And I've actually been a little bit disappointed that this issue hasn't gotten more play, but I have been talking about it a lot, and it's been very important for me in being able to communicate my vision to people, is that we take governments apart from the top down. And as you know, I'm running for president in 2020 on the platform of a peaceful, orderly dissolution of the United States federal government. I hope by then I'll be pulling 2 or 3%, and that in 2024 or 2028, if I'm not a contender, everybody's running on this platform because everybody's on board with it as the inevitable way for progress. But how do you actually transition to a voluntary society without pulling the rug out from underneath everyone? And this is, I hate to borrow a phrase from George W., but compassionate libertarianism has to take these things into account. So you can dissolve governments from the top down, and then when you get to the local level, the county level, then you can transition to private property collectives, and then to full full free market that's a voluntary system. But if you don't provide a mechanism for that, the pragmatic people in society aren't going to get on board. We've kind of hit the demographic limit of the early adopters of the movement. If we're somewhere around 1 or 2 million people, the people that are already intellectually inclined, that understand, as almost a matter of faith or a scientific principle, the idea that nonviolent relationships will always be superior to violent, coercive relationships. And most people don't have that ability to take like a single scientific principle and see the world through that lens. So you have to provide them with that. I think Chapter 10 does that in a lot of unique ways.
So, what I mean, I really have thought about this subject as well because I think taking a strictly anarchist position and trying to move away from government and to solve our problems, like you said, there's so many people, whether we like it or not, who are sucked onto the state system, and they won't survive without it at this point until we have enough localized solutions where there's a support system built up. It's really kind of, like you said, uncompassionate to just take it all away.
Just jump in. This has been a major problem with the way the movement has gone since it was really identified as a movement under Rothbard's leadership, and his first codification of the message is that it's been like watered down. Well, let's instead of convincing people that there's this beautiful philosophical moral message, let's just try to get them to do a little less government here or there. And you don't win converts that way. That's the problem. They go back to the old ways. And it's because that was easier to convince people. And it was kind of like shying away from the true message. And that's why I think we've been stalled for the last several decades as a movement. We haven't made progress because we've gotten away from that beautiful moral philosophical message.
So do you think, though, the idea of using, because, I agree on that point, it's hard to just transition. There has to be a transition. And for me, I see Agorism as being that transition with more and more people investing in black and gray markets, as you said, instead of waiting for this collapse, getting active, local, building sustainable solutions. Now, if we were to have a president, maybe yourself, who stepped in there, what actual power does the president have, or that you're aware of, that could help to start reducing this, and would this be a justifiable call to say this is minarchism?
No, not at all. This is absolutely not minarchism. And it's almost, again, another intellectual cop-out to just sort of say, oh, well, you want to have a transition that actually gets us there, as opposed to, that's not libertarianism. But I don't mean to discount agorism at all. I think it's absolutely essential right now to disempowering the state and freeing yourself. And there's actually a section on the book that talks about agorism and puts it in that context. At the same time, if society is half agorist and half statist, well, then the statist half is still going to fund the police and the military and come in and knock your door down if they feel like it. And I'm not willing to put up with that. We have to really address that. And one of the cool things about localization is you don't even have to win everybody as a convert. You just have to convince them that they're better off dealing with the state government instead of the federal government. Like, okay, so you still think you need to be governed. How about having it like this instead of like this? And I think it's a lot easier to get people on board, especially with the modern secessionist streak in America. So what can the president do? This is really not that important when you think about what it would mean to elect someone on this platform and to have a national consensus that this is what's going to happen. One of the books that I'm going to be writing, and it's not in the encyclopedia because the encyclopedia is the series that's applicable to the entire world, but as an addendum, if you will, or same thing in that style, I'm going to be writing a book called American Freedom that is the process of this. And with I don't even know how you would start, but there are a lot of agencies that you just eliminate. You say, all right, we're going to sell this off. And I think there's a lot of things that you can do as president when you can appoint someone to the head of the Department of Justice. First of all, you can release all federal inmates who are in jail for victimless crimes. Then you can turn over. It's a process of turning over the remainder basically to the state government. Federal Department of Education, you can just eliminate it. And there does need to be a more careful transition with a lot of the employees and the property and how you handle that. But I think what you would do is you would end up paying restitution to all the victims of the federal government around the world, in the United States. So property can be sold off to those who will pay for it, and those resources would go to compensating victims of the government. For the Department of Defense, you might think that gets a little trickier, but it's really not. You sell off excess materials, stuff that can be returned to state governments as appropriate, can be returned to state governments. But one of the important and very I think what will be a controversial section in the book, although it really hasn't been yet, is the application of libertarian philosophy to defense. And that the best defense is not having a big military, but rather having a population that refuses to be governed by anyone. And I know you understand this, but it's a subject for a lot of people that they really have to stop and consider and wrap their heads around. So I don't know. Do you have more specific questions? Because I wish I had a lot, a whole set of specific answers, but it's one of the things I'm looking forward to doing is coming up with the detailed plans and having that book serve as a campaign platform.
Well, I think that the first part of your answer really answered what I was trying to get at, which is that, essentially the idea of you running for president is, as you said, you don't expect to win in 2020, but as time passes, these ideas become more popular through the book, through this message being propagated. And by that point, if people would elect somebody running on this platform, then obviously they're ready to let go of government. So I get that, but there's also others, and I'm sure you've seen this and got emails or whatever, that there are some people who are still buying it, even though they hear your message. They're still hoping that you will be the leader and actually looking forward to like a presidency from you, as in the way they've seen, in the past.
I don't think
they're still holding on to it.
There might be a handful in the audience who have seen not enough or haven't read the book that are looking forward to that. But no, I don't. I think people understand that I'm not running to be president of the United States. I'm going to be the last president of the United States.
That's better.
And I will share. I have a couple other exciting plans. Like, I'm not going to dissolve the IRS right away. Just to be clear. I will immediately cease all collection operations of the IRS, but no one who works for the IRS will be allowed to go home without either having their hands cut off or making a severe public apology. So
do you think there's
there's a lot that you can do to achieve real justice in the dissolution of this horribly unjust system. And I think reparations, for all the victims of the federal government, is a very important thing that we can do.
Absolutely. One last question, and then I'll let you go for today. Do you think there's any philosophical qualms with being a president and doing these things by executive order over the entire population of a geographical location?
No, because you understand that the federal government and really all governments are independent corporate entities at this point, that the Constitution is essentially irrelevant. I would consider, an executive order upon taking office of dissolving Congress, and I would not be taking an oath to the Constitution. That would be one thing that would be unique about this presidency. It'd be like, no, I'm coming in. This is it. This is how it is. I swear I would be swearing myself in on the book American Freedom as my campaign platform, and my stake in my reputation on carrying out that plan faithfully and being true to exactly what I said I was going to do upon running. And if you win on this, it's because people are ready for it. They've accepted it. So Congress might even be dissolved instantly upon me taking office. It might be that we then have to keep Congress around as an organization to simply help distribute property based on congressional districts. Who knows? But I'm really looking forward to getting into all that. But that is at least a few years off before we get into the nitty-gritty. And I hope to have a lot of help. So I hope people will, if nothing else, take that as an incentive to plug in with me online. Because, like I said, this book being, having been in many ways crowdsourced for the editing and for a lot of the concept development, the platform is going to require a lot of input from a lot of experts and from the public as well. So again, find me on YouTube, youtube.com/Adam Kokesh, Twitter @Adam Kokesh, and the main website where you can order copies of the book now is thefreedomline.com.
Awesome. Thanks again, man. It's always good to talk with you and catch up on what you're up to and your fight for freedom, because I really feel like we're becoming more and more on the same pathway. And I think more people, this is just happening, that people are realizing, okay, we can't just scream and yell for freedom. We can't just, my big thing as well, and I think that you touch on this as well in the book with the localization aspect, has been, and this is something I'm going to speak at this Liberty Fest in New York. It's basically what I'm calling how to step out of libertarian circle jerk, which is the idea that, preaching to the choir and just talking, we have this forum, like you said, this movement, these ideas, but we're such a small percentage. And one thing I try to do in the local community in Houston is combine music and, philosophy and activism and gardening, all these different ideas that can bring people together, particularly in social scenes, and present the ideas without, beating into their head. Some people won't watch the videos, or at least they're not there yet, but they may hear the message when they're out somewhere enjoying music or enjoying art, and they realize there's a bigger philosophical meaning behind the whole event they're at. And that's really what I try to do, is create this physical space, even just for a few hours, and in a city like Houston, create an agora and an interaction, an open market for people to exchange ideas. And those are the answers, and I really appreciate your time, man.
Yeah, well, if I may, just one more thing. When you embrace freedom, you get a sense of the inevitability of it. That no one goes in the other direction. People are not convinced of more violence being necessary. There is no other violent philosophy. It's simply a failure of love and connectedness that leads people to statism or to violence in any of its forms. And when you're able to see this and be on this path, you see there's a certain inevitability to the progress of the movement as well. And I can tell that intellectually you're on that same path, and it's great to be friends with other activists like yourself.
Awesome, man.